66 million years ago, on what would become the Yucatan Peninsula, the sky began to change. It started as a pinprick of light, barely visible against the afternoon sun. Within seconds, it grew brighter, hotter, a streak of fire tearing through the atmosphere at 45,000 miles per hour, turning the air itself into plasma. On a hillside overlooking what we now call the Gulf of Mexico, a lone triceratops stood motionless. Her 3 horns caught the strange light filtering through the canopy. Around her, the forest had gone silent. No bird calls, no insect hum, just an eerie, suffocating quiet that every animal on Earth could somehow feel in their bones. The ground beneath her feet began to vibrate, softly at first, then stronger. Pebbles danced on the soil. In the distance, a flock of pterosaurs erupted from the treetops, screeching in panic, their wings beating frantically against air that suddenly felt wrong, thick, electric. She did not know that the object screaming toward her world was 6 miles wide. She did not know it had traveled through the void of space for millions of years, pulled by gravity into an appointment with Earth that had been set since the formation of the solar system. She did not know that in less than 10 seconds, everything she had ever known would cease to exist. But somehow, she knew this was the end. The asteroid struck the shallow sea at a 20-degree angle, punching through the atmosphere, the ocean, and 12 miles into the Earth's crust in less time than it takes to blink. The energy released was equal to 10 billion Hiroshima bombs detonating simultaneously. 10 billion. The impact vaporized trillions of tons of rock instantly, sending a mushroom cloud of superheated debris 62 miles into the sky. The shockwave expanded outward at supersonic speed, flattening every tree, every creature, every living thing within 1,000 miles in the first 30 seconds. But here is where the story gets strange. Here is where the official narrative starts to crack. This is Mr. H. What you are about to witness over the next 2 hours is not just the story of how the dinosaurs died. It is the story of how Earth hit a reset button so precise, so selective, so impossibly perfect, that it raises a question science still refuses to answer out loud. What if the asteroid was not the only reason everything disappeared? Before we go further, I want to know something. Where are you watching this from right now? Are you in North America, Europe, Asia? And is it daytime where you are? Or are you listening to this in the darkness, maybe trying to fall asleep? Drop your location in the comments. I read every single one, and it helps me understand who is out there, listening to these mysteries with me in the middle of the night. Now, back to that day, the worst day in the history of complex life on Earth. Within minutes of impact, a magnitude 11 earthquake radiated across the planet. To put that in perspective, the largest earthquake ever recorded by humans was a 9.5. This was 11. The entire planet rang like a bell. In North America, the ground rose and fell in waves 20 feet high. Solid bedrock moved like ocean swells. A wall of water 1,500 feet tall roared outward from the impact site, obliterating coastlines on every continent. But the water was not just water. It was boiling, filled with molten rock and shattered earth, moving at 600 miles per hour. Animals that had survived the initial shockwave now faced the heat. And this is where it gets truly incomprehensible. The thermal radiation from the impact was so intense that it ignited every forest, every grassland, every living plant within 1,000 miles. But the heat did not stop there. Debris ejected into the atmosphere re-entered at orbital velocity all over the globe, creating thousands of secondary fireballs. The sky itself caught fire. Paleontologists call it the global broiling event. Imagine standing outside and watching the sky turn orange, then red, then white hot. Imagine feeling your skin begin to burn from radiation coming from above, not from any single point, but from everywhere at once. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run, and yet, somehow, some things survived. Crocodiles, lying in the mud, made it through. Turtles, slow and vulnerable, lived. Small mammals, no bigger than rats, survived in burrows. But the mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex, the most successful predator ever to walk the earth, vanished completely. So did Triceratops. So did Brachiosaurus. Every single dinosaur larger than a modern turkey went extinct. But here is the problem. The extinction pattern makes no sense. Scientists have run computer simulations of the asteroid impact thousands of times. They have modeled the dust cloud, the temperature drop, the collapse of the food chain, and every single time, the models show the same thing. An asteroid this size should not have been enough to cause a global mass extinction. It should have caused a regional disaster, maybe even a continental one. But not this. Not 75% of all species on Earth wiped out in a geological instant. Something else happened. Something the textbooks do not talk about. Something that makes the official story feel incomplete, like a puzzle with pieces missing. On the other side of the planet, in what is now India, the Deccan Traps were erupting. These were not normal volcanoes. They were fissures in the Earth's crust miles long, pouring out lava continuously for over 700,000 years. By the time the asteroid hit, they had already covered 500,000 square kilometers in molten rock over a mile deep. But here is the truly bizarre part. The Deccan Traps, which had been erupting steadily for millennia, suddenly went into overdrive at the exact moment the asteroid struck. The seismic shockwave from Chicxulub traveled through the Earth's mantle and triggered the largest volcanic eruption in 66 million years on the opposite side of the planet. Coincidence? Maybe, but the timing is too perfect. The scale is too perfect. It feels less like a random disaster and more like a deliberate mechanism, a planetary reset button that required two catastrophes to activate fully. So the asteroid hits. The volcanoes explode. The sky turns black with ash and sulfur dioxide. Sunlight is blocked for months, maybe years. Photosynthesis stops. Plants die. Herbivores starve. Carnivores starve. The food chain collapses from the bottom up. This is the story we are told, and it is true, but it is not complete. Because when you look at the fossil record closely, really closely, you start to see cracks. You start to see things that do not add up, gaps that are too big to ignore, survivors that should not exist, and disappearances that happened before the asteroid even arrived. 66 million years ago, Earth reset. But the way it reset, the precision of what lived and what died, suggests something far stranger than a random rock from space. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, extinction events are not accidents. They are scheduled. The Chicxulub crater sits buried beneath the Yucatan Peninsula, hidden under 1/2 mile of limestone and ocean sediment. It measures 112 miles across. To put that in perspective, if you stood at the center of the crater, you would not be able to see the rim even on a perfectly clear day. It would be beyond the horizon in every direction. When geologists first discovered it in the 1970s, they knew immediately they were looking at something catastrophic. The rock layers told a story of unimaginable violence. Shocked quartz, tektites, spherules of vaporized rock that had been thrown into space and rained back down across the entire planet. But here is what they did not expect. When they started running the numbers, the physics did not work. The asteroid that created Chicxulub was roughly 6 miles wide, maybe 10 at the absolute maximum. It was traveling at 12 miles per second when it hit. Those numbers sound enormous, and they are. But when you plug them into impact models, when you calculate the energy release and compare it to what actually happened to life on Earth, something is off. The impact released approximately 400 zetajoules of energy. That is a 4 followed by 23 zeros. It is equivalent to 10 billion nuclear weapons. It created an explosion so powerful that it punched a hole in the Earth's crust and exposed the mantle below. The heat was so intense that it turned seawater into superheated steam in milliseconds. But according to modern simulations, that should not have been enough. Dr. Joanna Morgan from Imperial College London led a drilling expedition into the Chicxulub crater in 2016. Her team pulled up rock cores from the Peak Ring, the circular mountain range that formed inside the crater moments after impact. What they found was shocking. The rocks showed that the asteroid vaporized on contact. It did not penetrate deep into the crust. It essentially exploded on the surface. That means most of its energy was released upward and outward, not downward into the Earth. In other words, the impact was actually less efficient at causing long-term damage than scientists originally thought. It was spectacular. Yes, devastating. Absolutely. But global extinction level? The math says no. So why did 75% of species die? Let us talk about the impact winter theory. This is the mainstream explanation you will find in every textbook. The idea is simple. The asteroid threw so much dust and soot into the atmosphere that it blocked out the sun for months or even years. Without sunlight, plants could not photosynthesize. Without plants, herbivores starved. Without herbivores, carnivores starved. The entire food web collapsed. It sounds logical. It sounds airtight. Except when you run the numbers, it falls apart. Studies published in the journal Nature in 2020 analyzed the amount of sulfur and carbon released by the impact. They estimated that global temperatures would have dropped by around 20 degrees Fahrenheit and stayed that way for about 5 years. 5 years sounds like a long time, but many species of dinosaurs had lifespans of 30 to 50 years. They had survived colder periods before. They had survived droughts. They had survived volcanic winters. 5 years of cold should not have killed them all. And here is another problem. If the impact winter killed the dinosaurs, it should have killed everything that depended on sunlight. But it did not. Freshwater turtles survived. Crocodiles survived. Frogs and salamanders survived. These are cold-blooded animals that cannot regulate their body temperature. They are far more vulnerable to temperature changes than dinosaurs were, and yet they made it through just fine. Meanwhile, dinosaurs, which had thrived through 160 million years of climate change, volcanic eruptions, and shifting continents, went completely extinct. Not one species survived. Not one. The selectivity is too precise. Dr. Peter Schulte, from the University of Erlangen in Germany, has argued that the asteroid impact alone cannot explain the extinction pattern. In a 2010 paper, he pointed out that many dinosaur species were already in decline before the asteroid hit. Fossil diversity was dropping. Habitats were shrinking. Something was already killing them slowly. The asteroid, he suggests, was just the final blow. But what was weakening them first? Then there is the energy distribution problem. When an object moving at 12 miles per second hits the Earth, the energy does not spread out evenly. Most of it is concentrated at the impact site. The shockwave weakens exponentially as it moves outward. By the time it reaches the other side of the planet, it is barely noticeable. So how did species in Australia die? How did species in Antarctica die? How did species in Asia, thousands of miles away from Chicxulub, go extinct at the exact same time? The standard answer is the global firestorm. The idea that debris re-entering the atmosphere heated the air enough to ignite forests worldwide. But recent models have challenged this too. Researchers at the University of Colorado found that the heating effect would have been intense but brief. Minutes, not hours. Most animals could have survived by simply staying underground or underwater during the worst of it. And yet, they did not. Here is the strangest part. The Chicxulub impact was not even the largest asteroid to hit Earth in the last 100 million years. There have been bigger craters. The Vredefort crater in South Africa is 190 miles across. The Sudbury Basin in Canada is 130 miles wide. Both were caused by asteroids significantly larger than the one that supposedly killed the dinosaurs. But neither of those impacts caused mass extinctions. Life recovered quickly. The ecosystems adapted. So why was Chicxulub different? Unless it was not the asteroid that did it. Unless the asteroid was just one part of a much larger event. A trigger, not a weapon. A spark that ignited something already waiting to explode. And when you start looking at what else was happening 66 million years ago, the picture becomes much more disturbing. Halfway around the world from Chicxulub, something else was destroying the planet. Something that had been destroying it for nearly 1 million years before the asteroid ever arrived. The Deccan Traps. If you fly over Western India today, you will see a landscape unlike anywhere else on Earth. Vast plateaus of black rock stretching for hundreds of miles. Step formations that look almost artificial, like a giant staircase carved into the earth. The word traps comes from the Swedish word for stairs. But these are not stairs. They are layers of solidified lava, stacked one on top of another, each one representing a separate eruption. And there are thousands of them. The Deccan Traps cover an area of nearly 200,000 square miles. That is roughly the size of Spain. But the truly terrifying part is not the size. It is the depth. In some places, the lava is over 6,000 feet thick. 6,000 feet of molten rock, cooled and hardened, representing eruption after eruption after eruption that lasted for 750,000 years. To understand how insane that is, consider this. The eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980 lasted 9 hours. The eruption of Mount Pinatubo in 1991 lasted a few days. Even the infamous eruption of Krakatoa in 1883 was over in a matter of hours. The Deccan Traps erupted continuously for 750,000 years. These were not normal volcanic eruptions. They were fissure eruptions, where cracks in the Earth's crust miles long would simply open up and pour lava onto the surface like water from a broken dam. There was no explosive force, no dramatic plume, just endless rivers of molten rock flowing across the landscape, burning everything in their path, releasing millions of tons of sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, and toxic gases into the atmosphere. Dr. Gerta Keller from Princeton University has spent decades studying the Deccan Traps. Her research has revealed something deeply unsettling. The eruptions were not constant. They came in pulses, massive outbursts of volcanic activity, followed by periods of relative calm. And the largest pulse, the most violent phase of eruption, happened at exactly the same time as the Chicxulub impact. Exactly the same time. Let that sink in for a moment. For 700,000 years, the Deccan Traps had been erupting steadily, poisoning the atmosphere, altering the climate. Then, at the precise moment an asteroid slams into the other side of the planet, the Deccan Traps suddenly explode with the most intense volcanic activity in their entire history. Coincidence? The odds of that are astronomical. In 2015, a team of scientists led by Dr. Paul Rene at UC Berkeley used advanced radiometric dating to pinpoint exactly when the largest Deccan eruptions occurred. They found that within 50,000 years of the asteroid impact, the Deccan Traps released over 70% of their total lava output. 70%. In a volcanic system that had been active for 750,000 years, the majority of the destruction happened in a geological eye blink, right after Chicxulub. The conclusion was unavoidable. The asteroid triggered the volcanoes. But how? The Deccan Traps are 7,000 miles away from the Yucatan Peninsula. That is half the diameter of the Earth. How could an impact in Mexico cause eruptions in India? The answer lies in something called seismic amplification. When the asteroid hit, it did not just create a shockwave on the surface. It sent vibrations through the entire planet. Those vibrations traveled through the Earth's mantle like ripples in water, and when they reached the other side of the globe, they converged. Imagine dropping a stone into a perfectly still pond. The ripples spread outward in all directions. Now imagine those ripples bouncing off the edge of the pond and traveling back toward the center. When they meet, they amplify. The waves become larger, more powerful. That is what happened inside the Earth. The seismic waves from Chicxulub traveled through the mantle, converged on the opposite side of the planet, and shook the Deccan Traps with enough force to fracture the magma chambers below. Chambers that were already full, already under pressure, already waiting to explode. The asteroid did not just kill with fire and shock waves, it weaponized the planet itself. Dr. Mark Richards from the University of Washington ran computer simulations of this effect. He found that an impact the size of Chicxulub would generate seismic waves strong enough to trigger volcanic eruptions on the opposite side of the Earth, especially if there was already an active volcanic system in place. The Deccan Traps were already primed. The asteroid just pulled the trigger. Now think about what this means for the extinction. It was not just an asteroid. It was not just volcanoes. It was both, at the same time, working together in a 1-2 punch that no ecosystem could survive. The asteroid filled the atmosphere with dust, blocking out the sun. The volcanoes filled the atmosphere with sulfur dioxide, creating acid rain that poisoned the oceans and stripped vegetation from the continents. The asteroid caused immediate, catastrophic destruction. The volcanoes caused slow, grinding death that lasted for thousands of years. Together, they created a world where survival was impossible. But here is the question that keeps scientists up at night. Was this a freak accident? A random alignment of two unrelated disasters? Or is there something about the way our planet works, something built into the very structure of Earth, that causes these events to synchronize? Because when you look back through geological history, you start to see a pattern. The Siberian Traps erupted 252 million years ago during the Permian extinction, the worst mass extinction in Earth's history. The Central Atlantic Magmatic Province erupted 201 million years ago during the Triassic-Jurassic extinction. The Karoo Igneous Province erupted 183 million years ago during another extinction event. Every major extinction in the last 300 million years has been linked to massive volcanic eruptions, and many of them align with asteroid impacts. It is starting to look less like bad luck and more like a system, a planetary reset mechanism that activates under specific conditions. Conditions we do not fully understand yet, and that should terrify us. Let us talk about who died and who lived, because this is where the entire story falls apart. 75% of all species on Earth went extinct 66 million years ago. That number gets thrown around a lot, but think about what it actually means. 3 out of every 4 species, gone, wiped out, erased from existence in what geologists call an instant, which in their language means anywhere from a few years to a few thousand years. But when you look closely at which species died and which ones survived, the pattern makes absolutely no sense. Start with the dinosaurs. Every single non-avian dinosaur went extinct. Every single one. Tyrannosaurus rex, the apex predator that had ruled North America for millions of years, vanished. Triceratops, Ankylosaurus, Edmontosaurus, all gone. In South America, the massive titanosaurs disappeared. In Asia, the hadrosaurs and ceratopsians vanished. In Antarctica, even the cold-adapted dinosaurs that had survived polar winters went extinct. Not one survived. Not in the forests, not in the mountains, not underground, not in the water. Complete extinction. Now compare that to crocodiles. Crocodiles are cold-blooded reptiles that cannot regulate their own body temperature. They depend entirely on external heat sources to survive. If the environment gets too cold, they become sluggish, unable to hunt, unable to eat. They should have been among the first to die during an impact winter, but they did not die. They survived just fine. In fact, crocodile fossils from immediately after the KPG boundary show no population decline at all. They continued thriving in rivers and swamps across multiple continents as if nothing had happened. Some species went extinct, yes, but the crocodile family as a whole sailed through the apocalypse without breaking a sweat. How? How does a cold-blooded reptile that needs warm water and abundant food survive a global catastrophe that killed every warm-blooded dinosaur on the planet? The standard explanation is that crocodiles could go into a state of torpor, essentially hibernating through the worst of it. They can survive for months without food by slowing their metabolism to almost nothing. Fine. That works for a 5-year impact winter. But what about turtles? Turtles also survived. Freshwater turtles, sea turtles, tortoises, all of them made it through. And turtles cannot hibernate as efficiently as crocodiles can. They are even more vulnerable to cold. Yet they survived while dinosaurs did not. Then there are the frogs and salamanders. Amphibians, creatures with thin, permeable skin that makes them incredibly sensitive to environmental changes. Frogs literally breathe through their skin. A slight change in air quality can kill them. Acid rain would have been devastating to amphibian populations. And yet, frogs and salamanders survived the extinction event with relatively minor losses. Meanwhile, the most successful land animals in Earth's history, creatures that had adapted to every climate and every continent, went completely extinct. The selectivity is surgical. Now let us talk about the oceans, because the ocean extinction pattern is even stranger. Ammonites, those beautiful spiral-shelled creatures that had existed for 350 million years, went completely extinct. Every single species. But Nautilus, their close relatives with almost identical biology, survived. Why? What was the difference? Both were shelled cephalopods. Both lived in similar ocean environments. Both had the same basic body plan. But one entire group vanished, while the other continued on as if nothing had happened. Scientists have been trying to explain this for decades. The best answer they have come up with is that Nautilus eggs were more resilient. Maybe. Possibly. They are not really sure. Sharks survived. Almost every major shark lineage made it through the extinction with minimal losses. But sharks depend on a functioning ocean food web. They need fish. They need squid. They need prey. And the base of the ocean food web, plankton, was absolutely devastated. Fossil records show that planktonic organisms suffered extinction rates as high as 90% in some regions. So how did sharks survive when their food source collapsed? How did they eat? What did they eat? These are questions without good answers. Then you have the mammals. Small mammals, no larger than a badger, survived in burrows and came out to inherit the earth. That part of the story makes sense. Small size, ability to hide underground, ability to eat almost anything. Those are good survival traits during a catastrophe. But here is the problem. There were large mammals alive during the late Cretaceous. Not dinosaur-sized, but big. Some were the size of modern dogs. Some were even larger. These animals had the same advantages as small mammals. They could burrow. They could scavenge. They were warm, blooded, and adaptable. But they went extinct. Almost all of the larger mammals disappeared. Only the smallest ones survived. Why? What was the cutoff size? And why was there a cutoff size at all? A global catastrophe should not care about body mass. It should kill indiscriminately. Unless it was not indiscriminate. Unless something was selecting. Dr. Steve Broussat from the University of Edinburgh has pointed out that the extinction pattern looks less like a random disaster and more like an ecological filter. Certain traits were rewarded. Certain traits were punished. It is almost as if the planet was testing every species and deciding which ones deserve to continue. Birds survived. But not all birds. Only a specific group of ground-dwelling birds made it through. The flying birds, the tree-dwelling birds, the ones that depended on forests and insects, most of them went extinct. But chickens, essentially. The ancestors of modern chickens survived. Why chickens? Of all the birds, why did the least impressive ones make it? Some scientists think it has to do with diet. Ground-dwelling birds could eat seeds, and seeds can survive underground for years, even decades. So when the forests burned and the plants died, the seeds remained, buried in the soil, waiting. And the birds that could eat those seeds had a food source when nothing else did. It is a reasonable explanation, but it also feels convenient. It feels like a just-so story invented to explain a pattern we do not actually understand. Because the more you look at the extinction data, the more it feels like something chose who lived and who died. Something decided that crocodiles were worth keeping, but dinosaurs were not. Something decided that small mammals had a future, but large ones did not. Something decided that Nautilus would continue, but ammonites would end. And that something was not a random asteroid. It was not a random volcano. It was both, working together, synchronized perfectly across time and space to create an extinction event so specific, so targeted, that it reshaped life on Earth in ways that still do not make sense. Dr. Peter Ward from the University of Washington has spent his career studying mass extinctions, and he has said something that most scientists will not say out loud. He said that the KPG extinction looks designed, not by intelligence, necessarily, but by some kind of planetary mechanism we do not understand yet, a reset function built into the Earth itself. And if that is true, if extinctions are not accidents but built-in features of our planet, then we need to ask a much more terrifying question. When is the next one? Evolution is supposed to be gradual. That is the cornerstone of Darwinian theory. Species change slowly over millions of years through countless small mutations, each generation slightly different from the last. And if that is true, the fossil record should be filled with transitional forms, creatures caught in the middle of their evolutionary journey. Half this, half that, links in the chain. But when you actually look at the fossils, those links are missing. And nowhere is this more obvious than in the transition from dinosaurs to birds. According to mainstream science, birds are dinosaurs. Not descendants of dinosaurs. They are dinosaurs. Modern chickens, pigeons, eagles, all of them are technically classified as avian dinosaurs. The theory is that a group of small, feathered theropods gradually evolved into the birds we see today. Over millions of years, their arms became wings, their scales became feathers, their bodies became lighter, more aerodynamic, until finally, they took flight. It is a beautiful story. It makes perfect sense, except the fossil evidence does not support it the way you would expect. If dinosaurs gradually evolved into birds over tens of millions of years, we should have thousands, maybe tens of thousands, of transitional fossils showing the progression. We should see fossils with half-formed wings, fossils with feathers that are not quite flight-capable yet, fossils showing the incremental changes in bone structure, in respiratory systems, in metabolic rates. But we do not have thousands. We have about 12 specimens, total, from all over the world, across 150 million years of evolution, 12 fossils that show anything resembling a transition between non-avian dinosaurs and modern birds. The most famous is Archaeopteryx, discovered in Germany in 1861, just 2 years after Darwin published On the Origin of Species. It was perfect timing, almost too perfect. Here was a creature with the teeth and tail of a dinosaur, but the wings and feathers of a bird. It looked exactly like what a transitional form should look like, and for over a century, Archaeopteryx was held up as proof that Darwin was right, proof that evolution happened gradually, proof that the fossil record, despite its gaps, could still tell us the story of life's progression. But then scientists started looking closer, and Archaeopteryx stopped making sense. First, the timing is wrong. Archaeopteryx lived 150 million years ago, during the late Jurassic period. But true birds, fully modern birds with all the characteristics we associate with flight, appear in the fossil record only 10 million years later. 10 million years. That is not enough time for the gradual step-by-step evolution that Darwin described. That is barely enough time for a few major mutations. It gets worse. In China, paleontologists have discovered dozens of feathered dinosaurs. Microraptor, Sinornithosaurus, Eutyrannus, all of them covered in feathers. Some of them even had 4 wings. But here is the problem. Many of these feathered dinosaurs lived millions of years after Archaeopteryx. Some of them lived alongside true birds. So the evolutionary timeline does not work. You have primitive feathered dinosaurs living at the same time as advanced birds, You have creatures that should be transitional forms appearing after the transition was supposedly complete. It is like finding a fossil of a monkey that lived after humans evolved. It breaks the sequence. Then there is the feather problem. Feathers are insanely complex structures. A single flight feather contains hundreds of thousands of individual barbs and barbules, all interlocking with microscopic hooks to create an aerodynamic surface. The engineering is so precise that even a small defect makes the feather useless for flight. How do you evolve that gradually? What good is half a feather? What good is a feather with barbs but no barbules? It cannot provide insulation. It cannot provide flight. It is just dead weight. Natural selection should have eliminated those intermediate forms immediately. And yet, the fossil record shows no intermediate forms. The earliest feathers we have found are already fully formed, already functional. They appear in the record suddenly, as if someone flipped a switch. Dr. Alan Fiducia from the University of North Carolina has been one of the most vocal critics of the dinosaur-to-bird theory. He has argued for decades that the fossils simply do not support a gradual transition. He believes birds evolved separately from dinosaurs, from a different group of reptiles entirely. His work has been dismissed by most of the scientific community, but his criticisms have never been adequately answered. Where are the fossils? Where are the transitional forms? If evolution is gradual, if it happens through tiny incremental changes over millions of years, then the fossil record should be overflowing with examples. But it is not. The record is full of gaps. And those gaps are not small. They are enormous. The Hell Creek Formation in Montana is one of the richest fossil sites in the world. It spans the last few million years of the Cretaceous period, right up to the KPG boundary. Paleontologists have been digging there for over a century. They have found thousands of dinosaur fossils: Triceratops, Tyrannosaurus, Edmontosaurus, Ankylosaurus, all perfectly preserved in layers of sedimentary rock. But when you look at the fossils closely, you notice something strange. There are very few young dinosaurs, very few juveniles, very few eggs. Most of the fossils are adults, fully grown, fully developed. It is as if the dinosaurs appeared in the fossil record already complete, lived their lives, and then vanished. And that pattern repeats across the entire Mesozoic era. Dinosaurs appear suddenly in the fossil record during the Triassic period, about 230 million years ago. Within a few million years, they had diversified into dozens of distinct species, each one fully adapted to its environment. No transitional forms, no experimental body plans, just fully functional dinosaurs. This is called the Cambrian explosion problem, and it applies to more than just dinosaurs. During the Cambrian period, about 540 million years ago, almost every major animal group appeared in the fossil record within a span of just 10 million years. 10 million years sounds like a long time, but in evolutionary terms, it is a blink. It is far too fast for gradual evolution to produce the diversity we see. Trilobites, mollusks, arthropods, echinoderms, chordates, all of them appear suddenly, fully formed, with no clear ancestors. It is as if life exploded into existence out of nowhere. Darwin himself called this the greatest objection to his theory. He believed future fossil discoveries would fill in the gaps. But 160 years later, the gaps are still there. If anything, they have gotten bigger. The more we dig, the more fossils we find, the more we realize that the transitions we expect to see simply are not there. Life does not gradually blend from one form to another. It jumps, it leaps, it transforms in sudden bursts that leave no trace of the in-between stages. Some scientists argue that this is just a preservation problem. Fossilization is rare. It requires specific conditions. Soft-bodied creatures, small creatures, creatures that live in environments where sediment does not accumulate, those are unlikely to fossilize. So maybe the transitional forms existed, but they just were not preserved. It is a reasonable argument, but it is also convenient. It is unfalsifiable. You can always say the evidence is missing because it was not preserved, but at some point, absence of evidence becomes evidence of absence. We have been searching for 160 years. We have excavated fossil sites on every continent. We have found dinosaur fossils in deserts, in forests, in mountains, in polar regions. We have found fossils of creatures as small as insects and as large as whales. We have found fossils of soft-bodied organisms like jellyfish and worms that should never have fossilized at all, and yet, the transitional forms remain missing. The links in the chain are still broken, and no one wants to ask the question that keeps surfacing in the back of every honest paleontologist's mind. What if they are missing because they never existed? What if evolution does not work the way we think it does? What if the jumps are real? What if life changes in sudden, dramatic leaps, triggered by events we do not yet understand? And if that is true, then the KPG extinction was not just a disaster, it was a transformation, a moment when the rules changed, when the old forms were swept away and the new forms appeared, fully functional, ready to inherit the Earth, almost as if someone pressed reset. There is a secret buried in the rocks of Montana, a gap in the fossil record that almost no one talks about outside of academic circles, and when they do talk about it, they downplay it. They explain it away. They call it an anomaly, a quirk of preservation. But it is not an anomaly, it is a pattern, and it appears all over the world. Scientists call it the 3-meter gap. In the Hell Creek Formation, one of the most intensively studied fossil sites on the planet, something very strange happens in the final layers of the Cretaceous period. As you dig down through the rock, moving backward in time, you find abundant dinosaur fossils, Triceratops bones, Tyrannosaurus teeth, Hadrosaur vertebrae, evidence of a thriving, diverse ecosystem. But then, exactly 3 meters below the KPG boundary, the layer of rock that marks the asteroid impact, the dinosaur fossils stop completely. You can dig through those final 3 meters, representing roughly the last 300,000 years before the extinction, and you will not find a single dinosaur bone. Not one. The official explanation is simple. It is a sampling bias, a preservation issue. Dinosaurs were still alive during those final 300,000 years, the argument goes, but their bones just were not fossilized in that particular location. Maybe the environment changed. Maybe the conditions were not right for fossilization. Maybe it is just bad luck. But here is the problem. The 3-meter gap does not just appear in Montana. It appears in Alberta, Canada. It appears in New Mexico. It appears in Wyoming. It appears in Patagonia, Argentina. It appears in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. It appears in multiple locations across India and China. Everywhere paleontologists look for late Cretaceous dinosaur fossils, they find the same thing. Abundant fossils up to a certain point, then nothing for the final few 100,000 years, then the extinction layer. If this were truly a preservation problem, it would be random. Some sites would show the gap, others would not. But it is not random. It is consistent, almost universal. And that consistency suggests something else entirely. It suggests the dinosaurs were already gone before the asteroid hit. Dr. Robert Bakker, one of the most famous paleontologists in the world, has been saying this quietly for years. He believes the fossil evidence points to a gradual decline in dinosaur populations leading up to the KPG boundary. Not a sudden catastrophic extinction, but a slow die-off that took hundreds of thousands of years. The asteroid, in his view, was the final nail in the coffin, but the coffin was already built. So what was killing them? What could cause a global decline in dinosaur populations over such a long time period without leaving obvious evidence in the rock record? Some scientists point to climate change. The late Cretaceous was a time of significant environmental upheaval. Sea levels were dropping, temperatures were fluctuating. The Deccan Traps had been erupting for hundreds of thousands of years, pumping sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Maybe the dinosaurs were slowly succumbing to these changes. But if climate change was the culprit, why did it affect only dinosaurs? Crocodiles lived in the same environments. Turtles lived in the same rivers and swamps. Mammals lived in the same forests, and they were fine. Their fossil records show no decline, no 3-meter gap. They continued thriving right up until the asteroid impact and beyond. The selectivity, once again, is too precise. Then there is the egg problem. Fossilized dinosaur eggs become increasingly rare in the layers leading up to the extinction. Some sites show a complete absence of eggs in the final million years of the Cretaceous. This has led some researchers to suggest that dinosaurs were experiencing reproductive failure. Maybe their eggs were not hatching. Maybe environmental toxins were affecting embryo development. But this theory has a major flaw. If dinosaurs were failing to reproduce, their populations should have crashed within a single generation. Dinosaurs lived for 30 to 50 years. If they stopped reproducing successfully, they would be extinct within 50 years, not 300,000 years. The timeline does not match. Dr. Jan Smit from Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam has studied the 3-meter gap extensively. He has argued that it is real, that it represents a genuine absence of dinosaurs, but that it does not necessarily mean they were extinct. Instead, he suggests that dinosaur populations became so sparse, so fragmented, that they stopped leaving fossils in the geological record. In other words, The dinosaurs were still alive, but there were so few of them that their bones were not being preserved. They had become ecologically irrelevant. Ghost populations clinging to survival in isolated pockets. It is a depressing image. The mighty rulers of the Mesozoic, reduced to scattered remnants, wandering through a dying world, waiting for the final blow. But even this explanation has problems. If dinosaurs were reduced to small, isolated populations, we should see evidence of inbreeding. We should see skeletal deformities. We should see signs of genetic stress in the fossils. But we do not. The last dinosaur fossils before the gap look healthy, robust, normal. They do not look like a species in decline. They look like a species that was doing fine one day and gone the next. And that brings us back to the most disturbing possibility. What if the 3-meter gap is not a gap at all? What if it is evidence of removal? What if something systematically eliminated dinosaurs from the fossil record in the final 300,000 years of the Cretaceous, leaving no trace, no evidence, no explanation? It sounds like science fiction. It sounds absurd. But the alternative, that dinosaur fossils just happen to stop being preserved all over the world at the exact same time, is almost as absurd. Dr. Peter Sheehan from the Milwaukee Public Museum conducted one of the most comprehensive studies of the 3-meter gap in 2000. He and his team spent years meticulously excavating Hell Creek sediments, looking for any trace of dinosaur remains in those final layers. They found nothing, not a single fragment. And Sheehan is not some fringe researcher. He is a mainstream paleontologist with decades of experience. And his conclusion was blunt. The dinosaurs, he said, were gone before the impact. The 3-meter gap is real, and we do not know why. The scientific community largely ignored his findings. It is easier to believe in a preservation bias than to admit we might be missing a crucial piece of the extinction puzzle. Because if the dinosaurs were dying out before the asteroid, then everything we thought we knew about the KPG extinction is wrong. And if we are wrong about that, what else are we wrong about? In 1980, a father and son team of scientists made a discovery that would change everything we thought we knew about the extinction of the dinosaurs. Luis Alvarez, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and his son Walter, a geologist, were studying a thin layer of clay in Gubbio, Italy. This clay marked the exact boundary between the Cretaceous and Paleogene periods, the KPG boundary, the moment the dinosaurs disappeared. When they analyzed the chemical composition of this clay, they found something shocking: iridium, lots of it, 30 times more than you would normally find in Earth's crust. Iridium is a rare element on Earth's surface. It is dense, heavy, and sank deep into the planet's core billions of years ago during formation. You do not find much of it in surface rocks, but you do find it in asteroids. Asteroids are loaded with iridium because they never underwent the planetary differentiation process that Earth did. Their iridium stayed mixed throughout their composition. The Alvarez team realized what they were looking at. The iridium layer was the smoking gun, proof that an asteroid had struck the Earth 66 million years ago, vaporizing on impact and spreading iridium-laden dust across the entire planet. When that dust settled, it created a thin layer that now appears in rock formations all over the world. It was elegant. It was conclusive. It explained everything, except it did not. Because when other scientists started looking for the iridium layer in other locations, they started finding things that did not fit the simple asteroid story. First, the layer is not always where it should be. At some sites, the iridium spike appears several centimeters above the extinction layer. At other sites, it appears below, and at a few sites, there are multiple iridium spikes, not just one, layers separated by thousands of years, each one showing elevated iridium concentrations. If the iridium came from a single asteroid impact, it should appear at exactly the same point in the geological record everywhere on Earth. The dust would have settled uniformly, creating one global layer. But that is not what we see. We see variation, inconsistency, multiple events. Then there is the source problem. Yes, asteroids contain iridium, but so does the Earth's mantle. Deep mantle plumes, the kind that drive massive volcanic eruptions like the Deccan Traps, can bring iridium up from the interior and deposit it on the surface. Volcanic eruptions are actually a much more common source of surface iridium than asteroid impacts. Dr. Gerta Keller, the Princeton geologist who has spent decades challenging the asteroid extinction theory, has argued that the iridium layer could have come entirely from the Deccan Traps. The timing matches. The Deccan eruptions were at their peak exactly when the iridium layer was deposited, and volcanic iridium would explain why the layer is not uniform, why it appears at different levels in different locations. Volcanoes do not deposit material evenly. They erupt in pulses. Wind patterns carry ash in different directions. Some areas get heavy deposits. Others get almost nothing. That variability matches what we actually see in the geological record far better than a single global dust cloud from an asteroid. But the scientific community has largely rejected this interpretation. The asteroid theory is too neat, too satisfying, and there is the Chicxulub crater itself, undeniable physical evidence of an impact. So the iridium must have come from the asteroid. It has to. The alternative raises too many uncomfortable questions. Except the questions do not go away just because we ignore them. In 2004, a team of researchers drilling into the Chicxulub crater itself found something unexpected. The iridium concentration inside the crater was lower than predicted, much lower. If the asteroid had been the source of all the iridium in the global layer, the crater should have been saturated with it. But it was not. Where did the iridium go? Did it vaporize completely? Was it ejected into space? Or was there less of it to begin with? Then there is the spheral problem. Spherules are tiny glass beads, formed when vaporized rock cools rapidly in the atmosphere. They are found in abundance at KPG boundary sites all over the world, and they have been cited as additional proof of the asteroid impact. Rock vaporized by the impact, thrown into the upper atmosphere, cooled into glass, and rained back down. But here is the catch. Spherules also form during volcanic eruptions. Explosive volcanic events can throw molten rock high enough into the atmosphere to create the exact same structures. And chemical analysis of KPG spherules has shown that many of them have compositions consistent with volcanic origin, not asteroid impact. In fact, at some sites, there are two distinct populations of spherules. One population matches the expected composition from Chicxulub, the other matches the composition of Deccan Trap basalts. Two different sources, two different events, layered on top of each other in the geological record. So which came first? Did the asteroid trigger the volcanoes? Did the volcanoes weaken the biosphere, making it vulnerable to the asteroid? Or were they completely independent events that just happened to occur at the same time through sheer cosmic bad luck? The iridium layer was supposed to answer these questions. It was supposed to be the definitive proof of what killed the dinosaurs. But the more we study it, the more complicated it becomes. The more it looks less like a single catastrophic event, and more like a series of overlapping disasters that we have compressed into a simple story because the truth is too messy. Dr. Jan Smit, who helped discover iridium at multiple KPG sites, has admitted in recent interviews that the picture is not as clear as it seemed in 1980. The iridium is real, the asteroid impact is real, but the relationship between the two and their relationship to the extinction itself is far more complex than anyone wants to acknowledge. Because acknowledging complexity means admitting uncertainty, and uncertainty does not make for good textbooks. It does not make for clean narratives. It does not give us the satisfying answer we crave, so we cling to the simple story. The asteroid killed the dinosaurs. The iridium proves it. Case closed. But the rocks tell a different story, a messier story, a story with gaps and contradictions and questions that no one seems willing to ask out loud. What if the iridium layer is not proof of what happened? What if it is proof of how little we actually understand? Crocodiles should not exist. That is not an exaggeration. Based on everything we know about the KPG extinction event, crocodiles should have been among the first creatures to die. They check every box for vulnerability. Every single one. Let us start with the obvious. Crocodiles are cold-blooded. They are ectothermic, which means they cannot generate their own body heat. They depend entirely on external temperatures to regulate their metabolism. When it gets cold, they slow down. When it gets too cold, they stop moving altogether. They become sluggish, unable to hunt, unable to defend themselves, barely able to breathe. Now remember what supposedly happened 66 million years ago. An asteroid impact threw enough dust and sulfur into the atmosphere to block out the sun for months, possibly years. Global temperatures plummeted. Some models suggest average temperatures dropped by as much as 50 degrees Fahrenheit in a matter of weeks. For a cold-blooded reptile, that is a death sentence. Crocodiles need water temperatures above 60 degrees Fahrenheit just to remain active. Below that, they enter a state of brumation, a reptilian version of hibernation. But brumation is not true hibernation. They still need to breathe. They still need some metabolic activity, and they definitely cannot stay in that state for years. So how did they survive an impact winter that supposedly lasted for half a decade or more? The standard answer is that crocodiles can go long periods without eating. That is true. A large crocodile can survive up to 3 years without food by slowing its metabolism to almost nothing. Impressive. But 3 years is not enough. If the sun was blocked for 5 years, if photosynthesis stopped for 5 years, if the entire food chain collapsed for 5 years, 3 years of fasting would not save them. And even if it did, here is the bigger problem. Crocodiles are ambush predators. They need prey. They need animals coming to the water to drink. But if 75% of species went extinct, if the forests burned, if the rivers filled with ash and acid rain, what were they eating when they finally woke up from brumation? There would have been nothing left. Yet, when we look at the fossil record, crocodile populations show almost no decline across the KPG boundary. In fact, some crocodile species seem to have thrived. Fossils from immediately after the extinction show healthy, robust crocodiles in North America, South America, Africa, and Asia. No mass die-off, no population bottleneck, just business as usual. Dr. Christopher Brochu from the University of Iowa has studied crocodilian evolution for decades. His research shows that crocodiles not only survived the extinction, but diversified rapidly afterward. New species appeared. New ecological niches were filled. It is as if the extinction event was not a catastrophe for crocodiles, but an opportunity. How does that make sense? How does a cold-blooded reptile not just survive an apocalypse, but thrive in its aftermath? Some scientists suggest that crocodiles survived because they lived in water. Water retains heat better than air. Rivers and lakes would have stayed warmer than the surrounding land, providing refuge from the cold. Maybe crocodiles just hunkered down in deep pools and waited it out. But that explanation ignores the acid rain problem. When the asteroid vaporized sulfur-rich rock, it created sulfuric acid that fell as rain for years. Rivers and lakes would have become acidic, highly acidic. And crocodiles, like all reptiles, have skin that is permeable to water chemistry. Prolonged exposure to acidic water damages their skin, their eyes, their respiratory systems. Freshwater ecosystems should have been among the most devastated environments on Earth. Yet crocodiles survived there without issue. Then there is the egg problem. Crocodiles lay eggs. Hard-shelled eggs that need to be buried in warm sand or vegetation to incubate. The temperature of the nest determines the sex of the hatchlings. Too cold, and you get all females. Too hot, and you get all males. The range for producing both sexes is narrow, just a few degrees. If global temperatures dropped by 50 degrees, crocodile reproduction should have stopped immediately. Even if adult crocodiles could survive in a dormant state, they could not reproduce. And without reproduction, the species would have gone extinct within a single generation. But they did not. They kept reproducing. And we know this because juvenile crocodile fossils appear in layers immediately following the extinction. Not decades later, not centuries later, immediately. That means crocodiles were laying eggs and successfully hatching them during or immediately after the impact winter, which means temperatures could not have dropped as much as the models predict. Or the impact winter did not last as long as we think. Or something about the crocodile reproductive strategy allowed them to bypass environmental conditions that should have sterilized them. None of those options fit the mainstream narrative. Dr. Gregory Erickson from Florida State University conducted a study on crocodile growth rates using fossil bone histology. He found that Cretaceous crocodiles grew at nearly the same rate as modern crocodiles. That means their metabolism was similar. Their environmental needs were similar. They were not some hyper-adapted super survivors. They were just crocodiles. Normal, regular crocodiles. And normal, regular crocodiles should not have survived the end of the world. But they did. And not just barely. They survived comfortably, confidently, as if the extinction event was not an extinction event for them at all. As if something protected them, or spared them, or chose them. Because when you line up all the survivors, crocodiles, turtles, frogs, small mammals, certain birds, they all share one thing in common. They are all creatures that could hide, burrow, go dormant. They are creatures with strategies for surviving short-term catastrophes. But the KPG extinction was not short-term. It was prolonged. It was global. It was total. Unless it was not. Unless the catastrophe was not as severe as we have been told. Unless the models are wrong. Unless the evidence has been misinterpreted. Or unless the selectivity was intentional. Unless something decided that crocodiles, who had survived for over 200 million years, who had outlived the dinosaurs, who had seen continents shift and climates change, deserved to continue. And if that is true, then we are not talking about a random disaster anymore. We are talking about a filter, a test, A mechanism that separates the survivors from the extinct based on criteria we do not understand. Crocodiles passed, dinosaurs failed, and no one can explain why. For 160 million years, mammals lived in the shadow of dinosaurs. They were small, timid, nocturnal. Most of them were no larger than a rat. They scurried through the underbrush, hid in burrows, came out only at night when the giant reptiles were sleeping. They were survivors, yes, but they were not competitors. They were not dominant. They were ecological afterthoughts, filling tiny niches that the dinosaurs ignored. And then, 66 million years ago, the dinosaurs vanished. And within 10 million years, mammals exploded across the planet in a diversification event so rapid, so dramatic, that it defies everything we know about how evolution is supposed to work. 10 million years after the extinction, mammals had grown from mouse-sized creatures to animals the size of modern horses. They had developed hooves, horns, specialized teeth, complex digestive systems. They had split into dozens of distinct lineages: primates, ungulates, carnivores, rodents, bats, whales, each one perfectly adapted to its environment. 10 million years. That is nothing in evolutionary time. That is a blink. For context, it took sharks over 400 million years to achieve their current diversity. It took birds nearly 150 million years. It took insects even longer. But mammals went from tiny generalists to ecological dominance in less time than it takes a mountain range to erode. How? The standard explanation is opportunity. The dinosaurs were gone. Ecological niches were empty. Mammals simply rushed in to fill the vacuum. With no competition, they could evolve rapidly, diversify quickly, exploit resources that had previously been unavailable. It sounds reasonable, but when you look at the fossil evidence, the timeline does not add up. Evolution by natural selection is supposed to be gradual. Random mutations occur, most are harmful and disappear. A few are beneficial and spread through the population. Over thousands of generations, small changes accumulate into large transformations. It is a slow process, a grinding process. It takes time. But the mammal explosion was not slow. It was explosive. Species appeared fully formed, with complex adaptations already in place. There are very few transitional fossils showing the intermediate stages. Just like with the dinosaurs and birds, the fossil record jumps from one form to another, with almost nothing in between. Dr. Mark Springer from the University of California has studied mammalian evolution using molecular clock analysis, comparing DNA sequences to estimate when different species diverged. His findings are startling. According to genetic data, the diversification of mammals began before the asteroid impact, millions of years before. That means mammals were already splitting into distinct lineages while the dinosaurs were still alive. They were not just waiting for an opportunity, they were preparing, evolving in advance, as if they somehow knew the dinosaurs were going away. But that is impossible. Evolution does not work that way. Evolution is reactive, not predictive. Species adapt to current conditions, not future ones, unless something was guiding the process. Unless the explosion was not random. Consider the speed of skeletal changes. Going from a small, generalized body plan to a large, specialized one requires massive alterations to bone structure, muscle attachment points, organ placement, metabolic rates. These changes involve thousands of coordinated mutations, and somehow, mammals achieved this in just a few million years. Dr. Robert Asher from Cambridge University has pointed out that the rate of morphological change in early Paleogene mammals is 10 to 20 times faster than what we see in modern mammal evolution. Modern mammals evolve slowly, predictably, but immediately after the extinction, their ancestors evolved at warp speed. Why? What changed? Was it just the absence of competition? Or was something else happening? Was the environment itself changing in ways that accelerated mutation rates? Were cosmic rays, unfiltered by a damaged atmosphere, causing genetic changes at an unprecedented rate? Or was the mammal explosion pre-programmed, written into their DNA, waiting for the right trigger? Some researchers have suggested that mammals carried genetic diversity that had been suppressed during the age of dinosaurs. They had the potential for size and specialization all along, but ecological pressures kept them small. Once those pressures were removed, the latent genetic programs activated, and boom, instant diversification. But if that is true, it means evolution is not random. It means species carry backup plans, blueprint variations stored in their DNA, ready to deploy when conditions change. That is not how Darwinian evolution is supposed to work. That is intelligent design without the designer, programming without a programmer. And it raises a terrifying question. If mammals were carrying this potential, waiting for the dinosaurs to disappear, what else is waiting inside modern species? What other transformations are coded into our DNA, dormant, silent, ready to activate when the next reset comes? Because the mammal explosion was not unique. After every major extinction event in Earth's history, there is a rapid diversification phase. New body plans appear, new species emerge, life rebounds faster than it should. It is almost as if extinction events do not just kill, they unlock, they open doors, they allow evolution to jump forward in ways that are impossible during stable periods. The dinosaurs ruled for 160 million years. During that time, mammal evolution was slow, stagnant, constrained. But the moment the dinosaurs were gone, mammals exploded into forms so diverse, so specialized, so perfectly adapted, it is as if they had been designed for a post-dinosaur world. And maybe they were. When the sky turned black and the sun disappeared, plants should have been the first to die. Photosynthesis stops without sunlight. No photosynthesis means no energy production. No energy means no growth. No growth means death. It is simple biology. Plants need light. Take away the light for weeks or months, and they die. Take away the light for years, and entire ecosystems collapse. And that is exactly what should have happened during the impact winter. The asteroid threw enough debris into the atmosphere to block out the sun completely. Temperatures plummeted. Acid rain poisoned the soil. Wildfires consumed forests on every continent. By all accounts, it should have been a complete botanical apocalypse. And it was, for a while. Fossil pollen records from the KPG boundary show a dramatic shift. Before the extinction, pollen samples are diverse, showing dozens of different plant species thriving in complex forest ecosystems. Then, right at the boundary layer, diversity crashes. Fern spores dominate, almost exclusively. Ferns are pioneer species. They are the first plants to colonize devastated landscapes because they reproduce through spores that can survive harsh conditions and spread over vast distances. After the asteroid impact, ferns covered the planet. It was a global fern prairie, stretching from pole to pole, the only green thing left alive. But here is what does not make sense. That fern stage did not last millions of years. It did not even last thousands. Within a few hundred years, maybe less, flowering plants began reappearing. Trees started growing again. Forests began to regenerate. A few hundred years. That is impossibly fast. Dr. Kirk Johnson from the Smithsonian studied fossilized leaf imprints from sites in Colorado and Montana. His work revealed that some plant species went locally extinct during the impact, but then reappeared in the fossil record just centuries later. Not similar species, the exact same species. Identical leaf structures, identical growth patterns. Where did they come from? If these plants were wiped out by fire and darkness, how did they return so quickly? The answer lies in seed banks. Seeds buried in the soil, protected from fire, protected from acid rain, waiting. Some seeds can remain viable for decades, even centuries, lying dormant until conditions improve. When the skies finally cleared and sunlight returned, those seeds germinated, and the forests came back. It is a beautiful survival strategy. But it raises an uncomfortable question. How did plants know to create long-term seed banks before the extinction happened? Seed dormancy is not a simple trait. It requires complex genetic programming. Seeds need to sense environmental conditions, determine when it is safe to germinate, and remain viable for extended periods without decaying. That kind of adaptation takes millions of years to evolve through natural selection. But the plants that survived the KPG extinction already had these mechanisms in place. They were already prepared for a catastrophe that had never happened before in their evolutionary history. It is as if they remembered something, as if their DNA carried instructions for surviving an event they had never experienced. Dr. Benjamin Blonder from the University of Arizona analyzed fossilized plant communities from before and after the extinction. He found that the plant species that survived were not random. They were specifically the ones with traits suited for recovery after massive disturbance. Deep root systems, rapid growth rates, high seed production, dormancy mechanisms. In other words, the survivors were selected. But selected by what? Natural selection works over millions of years. It cannot predict future catastrophes and prepare for them in advance. Unless catastrophes are not unpredictable, unless they happen regularly enough that species evolve permanent adaptations for surviving them, unless extinction events are so common, so cyclical, that life itself has built-in reset protocols. Some geneticists believe plants carry what they call stress memory. Exposure to environmental trauma can trigger epigenetic changes that get passed down to future generations. A plant that survives a drought might pass on drought resistance to its offspring, even if those offspring never experience drought themselves. But the KPG extinction was not something any plant had survived before. It was unprecedented in scale and severity, so how could they have memory of it? Unless they did not need memory of this specific event, unless they carried memory of previous events, earlier resets, earlier catastrophes that taught life how to survive the unsurvivable. The fossil record shows at least 5 major mass extinctions in Earth's history, and after every single one, plants recovered faster than animals, faster than they should, as if they had done this before, as if they knew the drill. And if plants can remember extinction events encoded in their DNA, what else remembers? What other information is stored in the genetic code of living things, waiting to activate when the world ends again? In 1984, 2 paleontologists made a discovery that should have changed everything we understand about extinction events. But instead, it was quietly filed away, discussed in academic papers, and mostly forgotten by the public. David Raup and Jack Sepkoski from the University of Chicago were analyzing the fossil record, looking at extinction rates over the past 250 million years. They were not looking for a pattern. They were just cataloging data, trying to understand the natural ebb and flow of species diversity over deep time. But when they plotted the data, something jumped out at them, something that should not have been there. Mass extinctions were not random. They were periodic. They occurred in cycles. Roughly every 26 million years, like clockwork, the number of species on Earth would suddenly plummet. Then life would recover, diversify, and thrive until the next cycle hit. 26 million years, over and over again, for 250 million years. The statistical probability of this being a coincidence is virtually zero. When you have 12 major extinction events spread across 250 million years, and 11 of them fall within a 26 million year cycle, you are not looking at randomness. You are looking at a pattern, a signal, a mechanism. But what mechanism? What force operates on a 26 million year timescale? The first theory that emerged was the Nemesis hypothesis. The idea is that our Sun has a companion star, a dim red or brown dwarf orbiting far out in the Oort cloud, the vast sphere of icy debris at the edge of our solar system. Every 26 million years, this companion star swings through the Oort cloud, gravitationally disturbing trillions of comets and asteroids, sending a barrage of them hurtling toward the inner solar system. Some of those objects hit Earth, and when they do, mass extinctions follow. It is an elegant theory. It explains the periodicity perfectly. But there is one problem. We have never found Nemesis. Astronomers have searched for decades, using increasingly sophisticated telescopes. If a companion star exists, even a dim one, we should have detected it by now. We have not, which means either Nemesis does not exist, or it is so faint and so distant that it is effectively invisible with current technology. The second theory is the galactic tide hypothesis. Our solar system orbits the center of the Milky Way galaxy, completing one full orbit every 230 million years. But the orbit is not a perfect circle. It oscillates up and down through the galactic plane, like a sine wave. Every 26 million years, we pass through the densest part of the galactic disk, where gravitational forces are strongest. Those forces disturb the Oort cloud in the same way Nemesis would, shaking loose comets and asteroids that rain down on Earth. This theory has more support because we can measure our position relative to the galactic plane, and the timing matches. We are currently moving through a relatively dense region of the galaxy, and we have been for the past few million years. But here is the unsettling part. Both theories, Nemesis and galactic tide, predict that we are currently in an extinction window. We are at the point in the cycle where impacts should be increasing, where the next mass extinction should be building. And when you look at the data, extinction rates are increasing. Not as dramatically as the KPG event, but measurably. Species are disappearing faster now than they have in millions of years. Some scientists call it the sixth extinction, the Holocene extinction. The one happening right now. Most people blame human activity, deforestation, pollution, climate change, and those are absolutely contributing factors. But what if they are not the only factors? What if we are entering a natural extinction cycle, and human activity is just accelerating something that was already beginning? Dr. Adrian Malott from the University of Kansas has studied the 26 million year cycle extensively. His research suggests that cosmic radiation may play a role. When the solar system passes through dense regions of the galaxy, we are exposed to higher levels of radiation from supernovae, gamma-ray bursts, and other stellar events. That radiation damages DNA, increases mutation rates, disrupts ecosystems. It does not cause immediate catastrophic extinction, but it weakens the biosphere over time, making it more vulnerable to other stresses. And when a major impact or volcanic event occurs during a radiation window, the combined effect is devastating. In other words, extinctions are not caused by a single event. They are caused by multiple events converging at the worst possible time. The 26 million year cycle is the timer, the rhythm, the underlying pulse that determines when the Earth is most vulnerable. And if that is true, it means the KPG extinction was not unique. It was not special. It was just the most recent beat in a drum that has been pounding since complex life began. Dr. Michael Rampino from New York University has taken this idea even further. He believes the 26 million year cycle is evidence of a self-regulating mechanism built into the structure of the galaxy itself. Life on Earth flourished during calm periods, but the galaxy does not allow calm periods to last forever. Every 26 million years it introduces chaos. It tests the biosphere. It culls the weak and rewards the adaptable. It is evolution on a cosmic scale, natural selection enforced not by competition between species, but by periodic catastrophes that reset the playing field. And we are part of that system. We evolved under its rules. Our ancestors survived multiple extinction cycles. Homo sapiens has only existed for 300,000 years, but our mammalian lineage has survived at least 2 full cycles of the 26 million year pattern. We are survivors of a process we did not even know existed until 40 years ago, a process that is still running, still ticking, still counting down to the next reset. And according to the data, we are overdue. There is a theory that most scientists will not talk about publicly because it sounds too much like intelligent design. But in private conversations, in late-night discussions at conferences, some of the brightest minds in evolutionary biology whisper about it. The theory is this: extinction events are not failures of the biosphere. They are features. They are necessary. They are how Earth prevents evolutionary stagnation. Think about it this way. For 160 million years, dinosaurs dominated every terrestrial ecosystem on the planet. They were incredibly successful. Apex predators, massive herbivores, flying reptiles, marine reptiles. They had conquered land, sea, and sky. They were perfectly adapted to their environments. And that was the problem. When a species becomes too successful, too dominant, too perfectly adapted, it stops evolving in meaningful ways. Oh, small changes still occur. Slightly longer teeth, slightly larger body size, minor variations in coloration, but the fundamental body plan remains the same. The evolutionary trajectory becomes locked. Dinosaurs had been refining the same basic designs for over 100 million years. Theropods had been bipedal carnivores since the Triassic. Sauropods had been long-necked herbivores since the Jurassic. The innovations were incremental. The diversity was high, yes, but it was diversity within narrow parameters. Different species of the same fundamental forms. evolution had plateaued, not because dinosaurs were failing, but because they were succeeding too well. Dr. Michael Benton from the University of Bristol has studied biodiversity patterns across geological time. His research shows that in the millions of years leading up to the KPG extinction, dinosaur diversity was declining, not because they were dying out, but because new species were appearing more slowly. The rate of innovation had slowed. Evolution was idling. And then the reset happened. The asteroid hit. The dinosaurs vanished. And within 10 million years, the planet was more biodiverse than it had ever been. New body plans, new ecological strategies, new forms of life that had never existed before. Mammals, modern birds, flowering plants, social insects. All of them exploded in diversity during the Paleogene period, the era immediately following the extinction. It was as if life had been holding its breath for 160 million years, and suddenly it could breathe again. This pattern repeats throughout the fossil record. After the Permian extinction 252 million years ago, the worst extinction in Earth's history, life rebounded with an explosion of new forms. Dinosaurs appeared. Marine reptiles appeared. The first mammals appeared. Biodiversity skyrocketed. After the Ordovician extinction 444 million years ago, fish diversified into dozens of new lineages. Jawed fish appeared for the first time. Bony fish, cartilaginous fish, armored fish, forms that had never existed before. Every major extinction is followed by a radiation event, an evolutionary explosion, a period of rapid innovation where life experiments with new designs, new strategies, new ways of being. It is almost as if extinctions do not destroy biodiversity. They liberate it. Dr. Douglas Irwin from the Smithsonian has argued that mass extinctions are evolutionarily creative events. They break up established ecosystems, eliminate dominant competitors, and create empty niches that new species can fill. Without extinctions, evolution would stagnate. Dominant lineages would lock in their advantages and prevent new forms from emerging. But here is where the theory gets controversial. If extinctions are necessary for evolutionary progress, does that mean they are designed? Does that mean Earth has a built-in mechanism for triggering them when diversity stagnates? The 26 million year cycle suggests yes. The synchronization of asteroid impacts and volcanic eruptions suggests yes. The precise selectivity of which species survive and which do not suggests yes. But designed by what? Not by intelligence, obviously. The Earth is not conscious. It is not making decisions. But complex systems can have emergent properties, self-regulating feedback loops that maintain balance without conscious intent. Your body maintains a constant temperature without you thinking about it. Ecosystems regulate population sizes through predator-prey dynamics without any central planning. Maybe the Earth regulates biodiversity the same way, automatically, mechanically, through processes that look random on small scales but reveal clear patterns when you zoom out far enough. Some researchers call this the Gaia hypothesis, the idea that Earth functions as a self-regulating system that maintains conditions suitable for life. Most scientists reject Gaia because it implies purpose, and purpose implies design. But what if it is not purpose? What if it is just physics? Just chemistry? Just the inevitable result of billions of years of planetary evolution? A planet covered in life will naturally develop feedback mechanisms, carbon cycles, temperature regulation, atmospheric composition control, and maybe, just maybe, periodic biodiversity resets. Not because the planet wants them, but because without them, life would stagnate, collapse, and never recover. Extinctions are not the enemy of life. They are the engine, the force that keeps evolution moving forward, instead of getting stuck in local optima. And if that is true, then the KPG extinction was not a tragedy. It was an upgrade, a hard restart that cleared out obsolete code and made room for something new, something like us. There is a question that hangs in the air during every paleontology conference, every late-night discussion among researchers who have spent decades studying extinction events. A question that nobody asks out loud because asking it means risking your career, your credibility, your reputation. But the question persists, and the more data we gather, the harder it becomes to ignore. What if the precision is not accidental? What if the selectivity is not random? What if extinction events are not natural disasters, but interventions? Before you dismiss this as conspiracy theory, as pseudoscience, consider what we have established so far. Extinction events occur on a predictable cycle. They involve multiple simultaneous catastrophes that seem to trigger each other. They eliminate dominant species while sparing others based on criteria that make no ecological sense. And they are always followed by explosive diversification that pushes evolution in entirely new directions. That is not how random disasters work. That is how culling works. That is how selective breeding works. That is how you redesign a system when the current version has reached its limits. Now, nobody in mainstream science is suggesting aliens showed up 66 million years ago and decided to delete the dinosaurs. That is absurd. But what if intelligence is not required? What if the universe itself has mechanisms we do not understand yet? What if consciousness, awareness, intentionality exist at scales and in forms we cannot perceive? Ancient cultures around the world have stories about cyclical destruction. The Hopi people speak of 4 worlds, each destroyed and remade. The Hindu texts describe yugas, vast cycles of creation and dissolution that span millions of years. The Maya had their concept of world ages, each ending in catastrophe. The Aztecs believed we are living in the 5th sun, and the previous 4 were destroyed by jaguars, wind, fire, and flood. These are not primitive superstitions. These are sophisticated cosmological models that describe exactly what the geological record shows. Periodic resets, cyclical destruction, worlds that end so new worlds can begin. Did ancient humans somehow know about the 26 million year cycle? Did they witness previous extinction events? Or did they tap into something deeper, some fundamental truth about how reality operates that we have forgotten in our obsession with materialism and mechanism? Dr. Anthony Avini from Colgate University has spent his career studying ancient astronomical knowledge. He has shown that cultures separated by oceans and millennia somehow arrived at similar conclusions about cosmic cycles. They built monuments aligned to celestial events. They tracked planetary movements with precision that rivals modern instruments. They understood time in ways we are only beginning to rediscover. And many of them believed that time was not linear. They believed history repeated. They believed destruction was scheduled. They believed the gods, or the universe, or whatever you want to call the force behind reality, periodically cleared the board and started over. What if they were right? Not in a literal sense, not with bearded men in the sky throwing lightning bolts, but in a deeper sense. What if the universe is not a dead clockwork mechanism, but a living, evolving system that corrects itself when things go off track? Physicist Freeman Dyson once speculated that the universe might be conscious at levels we cannot comprehend, not conscious like a human, but conscious in the way a forest is conscious, distributed, emergent, operating through trillions of interconnected processes that give rise to something greater than the sum of its parts. If Earth is part of that system, if life on Earth is part of that consciousness, then extinctions are not external attacks. They are internal adjustments. The planet sensing that evolution has stagnated, that diversity has plateaued, that something needs to change, and so it changes itself. Through mechanisms that look like natural disasters but operate with surgical precision. This is the forbidden question, not whether aliens did it, but whether reality itself is more intentional than we want to believe, whether the universe has goals, whether evolution has direction, whether we are part of a story being written by forces we can barely imagine. Science cannot answer that question. Science can only measure, observe, predict. It can tell us what happened, but not why, and the why is where the real mystery lives. The why is what keeps researchers up at night, staring at data that points toward patterns too precise to be accidents. The KPG extinction wiped out the dinosaurs and made room for mammals, made room for primates, made room, eventually, for us. Was that luck? Or was that the point? If you want to understand how life survives extinction events, do not look at the fossils. Look at what is still alive. Look at the creatures that witnessed the reset 66 million years ago and are still here today, because they are not just survivors. They are witnesses, living evidence of something we do not fully understand, and some of them should not exist at all. On December 22nd, 1938, a fishing trawler off the coast of South Africa pulled up something impossible. A fish, 5 feet long, steel blue scales, fleshy-lobed fins that looked almost like legs. The captain had never seen anything like it. Neither had anyone else. He brought it to Marjorie Courtney Latimer, a local museum curator. She took one look at it and knew she was staring at a ghost. The fish was a coelacanth, a species that, according to every paleontologist on Earth, had gone extinct 66 million years ago. The last known coelacanth fossil dated to the end of the Cretaceous period, the KPG boundary, the same extinction that killed the dinosaurs. Except here it was, alive, unchanged, swimming in the deep waters of the Indian Ocean as if the last 66 million years had never happened. The discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community. If coelacanths had survived, what else had survived? How many other supposedly extinct species were still out there, hidden in the deep ocean, in remote jungles, in places we had not looked carefully enough? But the coelacanth is not just a survivor. It is a time capsule. When scientists finally studied live specimens, they found that the fish had barely changed at all from its Cretaceous ancestors. The same body plan, the same fin structure, the same internal anatomy. Genetic analysis confirmed it. Coelacanths have one of the slowest rates of evolution ever recorded. They have been essentially frozen in time for 400 million years. 400 million years. That spans multiple mass extinctions. The Devonian extinction, the Permian extinction, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction, the KPG extinction. Every single one of them should have killed the coelacanth, but it survived them all without changing. How? The standard explanation is that coelacanths live in deep ocean environments that are stable, isolated, and buffered from surface catastrophes. Fair enough. But that does not explain why they stopped evolving. Evolution does not stop just because an environment is stable. Mutations still occur. Selection pressures still exist. Even in the deep ocean, species should change over millions of years. But coelacanths did not. They hit upon a successful design 400 million years ago and never deviated from it. It is as if their DNA was locked, protected, archived. Some geneticists believe coelacanths possess what they call genetic redundancy, multiple backup copies of essential genes that prevent harmful mutations from spreading. If a mutation occurs in one copy, the backups compensate. The organism remains unchanged. It is a form of evolutionary stasis built into the genome itself. But why would a species evolve mechanisms to prevent evolution? Unless evolution is not always beneficial. Unless there are times when the best survival strategy is not to change, not to adapt, not to innovate, just to endure, to wait, to outlast the catastrophes until conditions stabilize. The coelacanth did not survive the KPG extinction by being strong or fast or clever. It survived by being invisible, by living so deep, so quietly, that the extinction event passed over it like a storm passing over a submarine. And when the storm was over, it simply continued existing, exactly as it had before. If the coelacanth is a ghost, the Nautilus is a blueprint. A living instruction manual for how to survive the unsurvivable. Nautilus has existed for 500 million years. It has survived every major extinction event in the history of complex life on Earth. Every single one. And unlike the coelacanth, which lives in isolation, Nautilus lives in relatively shallow tropical waters, where it should have been vulnerable to climate change, ocean acidification, temperature fluctuations, all the things that kill marine species. But it did not die. It kept going, generation after generation, extinction after extinction. And it did so by following a design so perfect, so mathematically precise, that it appears in nature over and over again. The Nautilus shell grows in a logarithmic spiral. Each chamber is proportionally larger than the last by a constant ratio, 1.618 to 1. The golden ratio, the same ratio that appears in sunflowers, in galaxies, in the proportions of the human body. It is a mathematical constant embedded in the structure of reality itself, and the Nautilus carries it in its shell, as if the universe wrote the instructions for survival directly into its form. But the shell is not just beautiful, it is functional. Each chamber is sealed off as the Nautilus grows, filled with gas that provides buoyancy. The animal can regulate the gas mixture to rise or sink in the water column without expending energy. It is a biological submarine, perfectly engineered for efficiency, and that efficiency allowed it to survive when nothing else could. During mass extinctions, when ocean chemistry changed, when temperatures spiked or plummeted, when food sources collapsed, the Nautilus could retreat to deeper water, slow its metabolism, and wait for years, wait for decades, wait for however long it took for the ocean to stabilize. But here is the mystery. Ammonites had almost the same design, almost the same shell structure, almost the same survival strategy, and they went completely extinct at the KPG boundary. Every single species. Meanwhile, Nautilus sailed through without a scratch. What was the difference? Scientists have debated this for decades. The best answer they have is that Nautilus eggs were more resilient. Ammonite eggs were planktonic, floating near the surface, vulnerable to temperature changes and acidification. Nautilus eggs are benthic, laid on the ocean floor, protected from surface disturbances. One small difference in reproductive strategy. That is what decided which lineage survived and which vanished forever. One variable, one choice made millions of years before the extinction, when there was no reason to prepare for it, determined the outcome. Or maybe it was not a choice. Maybe it was programming. Maybe life carries multiple strategies, multiple blueprints, and catastrophes activate whichever one happens to be compatible with the new conditions. Maybe survival is less about adaptation and more about having the right backup plan already installed. Some researchers believe the Nautilus genome contains what they call evolutionary memory, genetic sequences that do not code for anything in the current organism, but remain intact, dormant, waiting. If conditions change, if the environment shifts, these dormant sequences can reactivate, producing traits that have not been expressed in millions of years. It is not evolution in the traditional sense. It is more like switching between preset modes. The organism is not creating something new. It is retrieving something old, something that worked before, something that might work again. And if the Nautilus can do this, what else can? What other species carry hidden blueprints, dormant strategies, archived survival protocols that only activate during catastrophes? And then there are the tardigrades, water bears, moss piglets, 8-legged microscopic creatures that laugh at extinction. Tardigrades can survive in the vacuum of space. They can withstand radiation doses 1,000 times higher than what would kill a human. They can be frozen to near absolute zero for years and come back to life. They can be heated to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. They can be dehydrated completely, losing 99% of their body water, and rehydrate decades later as if nothing happened. They are not tough. They are indestructible, and they have been around for at least 530 million years. maybe longer. They have survived every extinction event, every asteroid impact, every volcanic eruption, every ice age, every climate shift. Nothing kills them. Nothing even slows them down. How? The answer lies in their DNA. Tardigrade genomes are genetic junk drawers. They contain genes from bacteria, from fungi, from plants, from other animals. Roughly 17% of tardigrade DNA comes from foreign sources. Horizontal gene transfer on a scale that should not be possible. It is as if tardigrades have been collecting genetic tools from every organism they encounter, building a survival kit that covers every possible threat. Need radiation resistance? They have genes borrowed from bacteria that live in nuclear reactors. Need desiccation tolerance? They have genes from desert plants. Need freeze resistance? They have genes from Antarctic fish. They are biological USB drives. Data storage units. Archives of survival strategies collected over 500 million years. And here is the disturbing part. Some of those genes should not exist yet. Some of them code for proteins that did not appear in other organisms until hundreds of millions of years after tardigrades acquired them. It is as if tardigrades knew what would be needed before it was invented. Dr. Thomas Boothby from the University of Wyoming has studied tardigrade DNA extensively. His research suggests that tardigrades do not just borrow genes, they integrate them, they test them. They keep the ones that work and discard the ones that do not. They are evolving not through mutation but through acquisition, through collection. They are building themselves into the ultimate survivor, not through strength, not through speed, not through intelligence, but through preparation, through redundancy, through having a backup plan for every possible disaster. And that preparation has paid off. When the KPG extinction happened, when 75% of species died, tardigrades did not even notice. They were already equipped to survive asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, radiation spikes, ocean acidification, atmospheric collapse. They had seen it all before, or at least their genes had. They are living proof that survival is not about being the strongest or the fastest. It is about being ready, about carrying enough backup strategies that no single catastrophe can eliminate you. Which raises the question, if tardigrades can do this, why can't we? Why can't humans collect genetic tools, build redundancy, prepare for the next reset? Maybe we can. Maybe we are. Maybe that is what technology is. Our version of horizontal gene transfer, our way of collecting survival strategies from the environment and integrating them into our species, not through DNA, but through knowledge, through tools, through culture. We cannot survive in space naturally, but we built spacesuits. We cannot survive radiation, but we built shielding. We cannot survive without food, but we built agriculture. We cannot survive extinction events, but we are building backup plans. Seed vaults, DNA archives, bunkers, off-world colonies. We are becoming like the tardigrades, collecting strategies, building redundancy, preparing for disasters we hope will never come but know eventually will. Because we have seen what happens when species are not prepared. We have seen the gaps in the fossil record. We have seen the 3-meter gap. We have seen entire lineages vanish because they did not have the right backup plan installed. And we do not want to be next. These creatures, the coelacanth, the nautilus, the tardigrade, they are not just curiosities. They are blueprints, instruction manuals written in flesh and DNA, proof that survival is possible, proof that extinction is not inevitable, proof that life finds a way, not through strength, but through patience, through redundancy, through carrying the wisdom of the past into an uncertain future. They survived the reset, and they are still here, still watching, still waiting for the next one, just like we should be. The KPG extinction 66 million years ago was catastrophic. It reshaped the planet. It ended the age of dinosaurs. It opened the door for mammals, for primates, for us. It feels like the most important extinction event in Earth's history because it is the one that led directly to human existence. But it was not the first reset, not even close. And when you look deeper into the geological record, when you dig past the Cretaceous, past the Jurassic, past the Triassic, you start to see something unsettling. The KPG extinction was not unique. It was not even the worst one. It was just the most recent chapter in a story that has been repeating for billions of years. Go back 540 million years, the beginning of the Cambrian period. This is when complex life suddenly exploded across the planet. Trilobites, mollusks, arthropods, creatures with eyes, with shells, with segmented bodies. Within 10 million years, almost every major animal body plan that exists today appeared in the fossil record. 10 million years. In evolutionary terms, that is an eye blink. It is far too fast for gradual Darwinian evolution to produce such diversity. Darwin himself called it an inexplicable mystery. He predicted that future fossil discoveries would fill in the gaps, showing the slow progression from simple organisms to complex ones. But 165 years later, those gaps are still there. The Cambrian explosion remains unexplained. Life went from mostly bacteria and simple multicellular organisms to a riot of complex forms almost overnight, as if someone turned on a switch, as if the rules changed. And here is the thing. The Cambrian explosion was not the beginning of life. Life had existed for at least 3 billion years before that. 3 billion years of bacteria, algae, simple cells. Then suddenly, in what geologists call an instant, complexity emerged. What triggered it? The standard answer is oxygen. Atmospheric oxygen levels rose during the late Precambrian, allowing larger, more metabolically active organisms to evolve. More oxygen meant more energy, and more energy meant bigger bodies, more complex structures, more sophisticated behaviors. It is a reasonable explanation, but it does not explain the speed. It does not explain why all the major body plans appeared simultaneously instead of sequentially. And it does not explain the Ediacaran organisms that came right before the Cambrian. The Ediacaran period, from 635 to 541 million years ago, was populated by bizarre life forms unlike anything that exists today. Flat, quilted creatures that looked like air mattresses, frond-like organisms anchored to the sea floor, disc-shaped things with radial symmetry. None of them had mouths. None of them had obvious digestive systems. None of them fit into any modern animal category. And then, at the end of the Ediacaran, they vanished. Almost all of them went extinct, and in their place, the Cambrian animals appeared, hard-bodied, mobile, predatory, as if the entire ecosystem was wiped clean and reprogrammed with a new operating system. Dr. Simon Conway Morris from Cambridge University has spent decades studying Cambrian fossils. He has argued that the Cambrian explosion was not gradual evolution. It was a replacement event. The Ediacaran biosphere was eliminated, and something new took its place, something with entirely different rules. But what could cause such a replacement? Not an asteroid, not a volcano. There is no impact crater at the Precambrian-Cambrian boundary, no iridium layer, no evidence of catastrophic destruction. The Ediacaran organisms did not die in fire. They just faded away, as if they were erased. And that is even more disturbing than an asteroid impact, because it suggests that extinction events do not always need external triggers. Sometimes the biosphere just resets itself. Sometimes life decides it is time to try something new. The deeper you dig into Earth's history, the stranger it gets. The Precambrian, everything before the Cambrian explosion, represents roughly 88% of Earth's entire history. 4 billion years. And for most of that time we have almost no fossils. The fossil record before the Cambrian is almost completely blank. A few microbial mats, some stromatolites, layered structures built by bacteria, traces of algae. but almost nothing else. 4 billion years of life, leaving virtually no trace. Scientists call this the Precambrian fossil gap, and the official explanation is preservation bias. Precambrian organisms were soft-bodied. They did not have shells or bones. They lived in environments where fossilization was unlikely, so their remains simply did not survive. But that explanation is starting to crack, because we have found Precambrian fossils. Not many, but enough to know that preservation was possible. We have found bacteria. We have found algae. We have found the Ediacaran organisms. So fossilization was happening. Life was leaving traces. Just not very many, which means either Precambrian life was incredibly sparse, far sparser than we thought, or something else is going on. Maybe the fossil gap is not a gap. Maybe it is evidence of something we do not want to acknowledge. Maybe life on Earth has been reset multiple times. Maybe the Cambrian explosion was not the first complex biosphere. Maybe there were earlier attempts, earlier experiments, earlier ecosystems that rose, flourished, and were completely erased, leaving almost no trace behind. Dr. Andrew Knoll from Harvard University has suggested that Earth may have experienced multiple snowball Earth events during the Precambrian, periods where the entire planet froze solid, encased in ice from pole to pole. Each snowball Earth event would have been an extinction-level catastrophe far worse than the KPG impact, and each one would have wiped the biosphere nearly clean. But life recovered, every single time, and each recovery produced something new, something more complex, something closer to what eventually became the Cambrian animals. It is almost as if each snowball Earth was a test, a trial run, an iteration in a process of refinement. Life trying different strategies, different body plans, different approaches. And when one approach failed, when the climate shifted, or the chemistry changed, or some other factor made the current biosphere untenable, the planet reset and tried again. How many times? We do not know. The fossil record is too fragmentary. But there is evidence for at least 3 major snowball Earth events between 750 and 550 million years ago. 3 global freezes. 3 near-total extinctions. 3 recoveries. And each recovery produced more complexity than the one before, as if the system was learning, as if each reset incorporated lessons from the previous attempt. Now let us talk about the uncomfortable part. The part that keeps appearing in climate models and extinction rate studies and asteroid impact probability calculations. The part that scientists discuss quietly but rarely publish. We are living in an unusually calm period. The Holocene, the last 11,700 years, has been one of the most climatically stable periods in Earth's history. Temperatures have been mild, sea levels have been stable, no major asteroid impacts, no supervolcano eruptions, no runaway greenhouse effects or global ice ages. And that stability allowed human civilization to develop. Agriculture, cities, technology. Everything we have built depends on the climate remaining predictable, the oceans remaining stable, the biosphere remaining functional. But stability does not last. It never has. And according to every metric we can measure, the calm period is ending. Extinction rates are accelerating, not just from human activity, although that is a factor. Background extinction rates, the natural rate at which species disappear, even without human interference, have been climbing for the past 10,000 years. We are entering an extinction pulse, not as dramatic as the KPG event, not yet, but measurable, significant, accelerating. The 26 million year cycle suggests we are in an impact window. The galactic tide hypothesis predicts increased comet and asteroid activity over the next few million years. We have already had several near misses in the last century. Objects large enough to cause regional catastrophes passing within a few thousand miles of Earth. And then there are the supervolcanoes. Yellowstone, the Campi Flegrei in Italy, Lake Toba in Indonesia. All of them overdue by geological standards. all of them capable of triggering volcanic winters, climate shifts, and mass extinctions if they erupt with sufficient force. We like to think of these as distant threats, low-probability events, things that might happen but probably will not, at least not in our lifetimes. But the geological record suggests otherwise. It suggests that catastrophes are not rare, they are inevitable, and they operate on timescales that make human lifespans irrelevant. The average mammal species exists for about 1 million years before going extinct. Homo sapiens has existed for 300,000 years. By that metric, we have 700,000 years left. But averages are misleading. Some species last longer, some do not. And intelligent species, species that alter their environment as dramatically as we have, do not have much precedent in the fossil record. We are an experiment, a recent one, and the planet has not decided yet whether we pass or fail. Dr. Peter Ward from the University of Washington has written extensively about what he calls the Medea hypothesis. The idea that life on Earth is not self-sustaining, not resilient, not robust. Instead, it is self-destructive. It consumes resources, alters environments, and ultimately creates conditions that lead to its own extinction. Every major extinction event, he argues, was caused not by external catastrophes, but by life itself. The Permian extinction was caused by bacteria releasing massive amounts of hydrogen sulfide. The Ordovician extinction was caused by plants removing too much carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, triggering an ice age. The KPG extinction was just the final blow to ecosystems already collapsing from internal pressures. And if that pattern holds, then we are already in the process of causing the next extinction, not through climate change alone, although that is part of it, but through the cumulative effects of altering every major system on the planet simultaneously: atmosphere, oceans, soil chemistry, nitrogen cycles, biodiversity. We are pushing all of them toward tipping points we do not fully understand. We are not witnessing the next reset. We are causing it. And we do not even realize it yet. But maybe that is the point. Maybe intelligence is not a survival trait. Maybe it is a test, a filter. Species that develop technology face a choice. Use it wisely and survive, or use it recklessly and join the fossil record. We have not made that choice yet. We are still in the middle of the test. And the planet is watching, waiting to see if we are like the tardigrades, prepared and redundant and resilient, or like the dinosaurs, dominant and successful until we are not. The layers beneath us hold the answer. Billions of years of resets, billions of years of life trying, failing, and trying again. We are not the first intelligent species to walk this planet. We might not even be the first technological one. The fossil record is too incomplete to know for sure. But we might be the first one with a chance to survive the next reset. Because unlike every species that came before us, we can see it coming. We can study the patterns. We can learn from the fossils. We can prepare. The question is whether we will. As you lie here tonight, think about the layers beneath you, beneath the soil, beneath the bedrock, beneath the foundations of cities and the roots of forests. Layers of stone that were once mud, once sand, once the bottom of ancient seas. And compressed between those layers, the remnants of worlds that no longer exist. Trilobites that crawled across ocean floors 500 million years ago. Ferns that covered the planet after the asteroid hit. Dinosaur bones turned to stone, holding the shape of creatures that will never walk again. Each layer is a moment frozen in time. Each fossil is a memory the Earth refuses to forget. You are lying on top of 4.5 billion years of history. 4.5 billion years of life, trying, failing, adapting, surviving. Every atom in your body was once part of something else. The carbon in your cells was once part of a dinosaur. The calcium in your bones was once part of an ancient coral reef. The iron in your blood was forged in the heart of a dying star billions of years before Earth even existed. You are not separate from this history. You are made of it. You are the latest iteration in a process that has been running since the first self-replicating molecules appeared in a primordial ocean. You carry the legacy of every extinction, every survival, every reset in your DNA. And that is not a burden. It is a gift, because you are here, against impossible odds, through countless catastrophes, through asteroid impacts and volcanic winters, and ice ages and mass extinctions. Your lineage survived. Every single one of your ancestors, going back millions of years, lived long enough to reproduce. Not one of them failed. Not one link in the chain broke. You are the product of the greatest winning streak in the history of life on Earth. 66 million years ago, the world ended. The sky caught fire. The oceans boiled. 75% of species disappeared. But in the ashes, in the darkness, something waited. Small mammals hiding in burrows, seeds buried in the soil, bacteria clinging to life in the deep ocean. They waited for the sky to clear. They waited for the sun to return. They waited for their moment. And when it came, they did not just survive. They thrived. They diversified. They became us. We exist because the Earth reset. We exist because the dinosaurs did not make it. We exist because extinction is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the next chapter. And maybe that is the real lesson here. The real secret hidden in the fossil record, whispered by the rocks, carried in the genes of every living thing. Endings are not failures. They are transitions. The universe does not make mistakes. It makes experiments. And when an experiment runs its course, when a design reaches its limits, the universe clears the board and tries something new. The dinosaurs were not a mistake. They were magnificent. They ruled the earth for longer than any other group of land animals. But their time ended, and that ending made room for something else. Something smaller, something more adaptable, something that would eventually look up at the stars and wonder where it came from. We are the answer to a question the universe asked 66 million years ago. What comes after the giants? What emerges from the ashes? What form will intelligence take when it finally arrives? We are still answering that question. We are still figuring out what we are supposed to be, and maybe that is okay. Maybe the point is not to have all the answers. Maybe the point is to keep asking, keep exploring, keep surviving. Because the next reset is coming. Not tomorrow, not next year, maybe not for millions of years, but it is coming. The 26 million year cycle is still ticking. The Earth is still a living system that corrects itself when necessary. And when that moment arrives, when the skies darken again, when the ground shakes, when the climate shifts beyond recognition, we will face the same test every species has faced. Are we prepared? Are we adaptable? Do we carry enough backup plans, enough resilience, enough wisdom to survive what is coming? I do not know the answer to that, but I know this. We are the descendants of survivors. We carry 4 billion years of survival strategies in our genes. We have built tools, gathered knowledge, created civilizations. We have split the atom and walked on the moon. We have looked back at our own planet from space and seen how fragile it is, how beautiful, how worth protecting. If any species has a chance to survive the next reset, it is us. So sleep well tonight. Rest in the knowledge that you are part of something vast, something ancient, something that has endured through unimaginable catastrophes and emerged stronger every time. The Earth resets. Life continues. And tomorrow, you will wake up and be part of that continuation. If you found this journey through deep time relaxing, if it helped you see the world a little differently, consider subscribing to Mr. H. I make long-form documentaries like this one, exploring the mysteries that textbooks gloss over, the questions that keep us awake at night, or in this case, the questions that help us fall asleep. Thank you for listening. Thank you for wondering. Thank you for being here. Against all odds, in this brief moment between resets, 66 million years ago, the world ended and began again, just as you will tomorrow. Sleep well,